The Appalachian Mountains are one of the most ancient and mysterious places on the planet. Here, among the majestic peaks and dark forests, there are not only natural mysteries, but also scary stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. Today I will tell you about 3 frightening stories associated with this mysterious region. These stories will make you wonder whether you should believe in the supernatural, or perhaps it is better to stay away from these mountains. One day at dusk, I found myself and my girlfriend on Big Frog Mountain, a few miles from the nearest settlement. We decided to hike one of the old, not-so-popular trails, and left the car at the very beginning of the trail. It seemed like we were the only living things on this mountain. As soon as I got out of the car, I immediately sensed something was wrong. I stepped in a mud puddle, and the water in it was strange, light brown, almost murky, as if someone had added something unfamiliar to it. I showed it to the girl, and she too froze for a moment, looking at the color of the water. But basically, everything looked normal, and we continued on our way, trying not to think about it. It wasn't long before I noticed that the girl was getting nervous. She was looking around more and more often, as if someone or something was moving behind us in the woods. And the further we walked, the more I could feel something unseen pressing in on us, creating a sense of unease. We stopped, and she admitted that she was starting to get scared, though she couldn't exactly explain why. I felt the same way and suggested we go back to the car. The car felt a little calmer, but the tension remained. We settled into the front seat, trying to relax. We started kissing, and while her hand hung on the outside of the window, I felt a strange and familiar sensation in my back, like someone was standing right behind me. It was the same instinctive fear I felt when someone is watching you from the shadows. I told her to pull her hand into the car. She obeyed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in this car. After a few minutes, the feeling of someone's presence only intensified. I felt uneasy, as if I could feel someone standing very close behind me, next to the car, as if they wanted to come so close to touch me. I quickly raised my window, trying to chase that fear away, but being a teenager, with its raging hormones, I continued making out, trying to push the thoughts away, not giving much thought to that strange feeling. But after a few more minutes, I was literally pierced by a sensation like someone had touched my back with a live wire. It was painful and sharp, like an electric shock. My heart raced frantically. I sat up abruptly, pulling away from her, and started the engine. The girl was clearly embarrassed, and noticing how nervous I was getting, she asked what was wrong. I didn't know what to say. Everything inside me was screaming that something was wrong, but I couldn't explain exactly what it was. I just felt that this moment was dangerous, somehow unnatural. I told her I didn't understand what was going on, but I needed to get away from this place. We drove back down the mountain. The landscape, which had recently looked mesmerizingly beautiful, now seemed unfriendly and alien. The forest seemed thicker, and the silence of the night was a heavy shadow on the road. When we got back to my parents' house, I still couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. However, my parents assured us that the family was fine, and that calmed things down a bit. We ate dinner, trying to forget about this strange incident, and decided it was time to leave. I opened the door for her and walked around the car and started walking around the back of it. And then, as soon as I looked at the rear bumper, my blood froze in my veins. I saw the handprints. They weren't just muddy smudges, they were actual human handprints, and they were the exact same color as the weird mud puddle I'd stepped in. These prints, uneven and smudged, stretched across the body of the car, leaving a disturbing trail behind them. The most recent prints, with brightly colored finger dents, went straight to the back window, and the last one was there, above the glass. It was placed as if someone had been standing right next to the car, watching us, and was slowly approaching the driver's window, ready to touch it. When I saw those footprints, it was like my mind shut off. A sharp, cold chill swept over me, and I realized what had happened. It was like a lightning strike. The realization came instantly, without a doubt. We were not alone. The one who had been with us had been following when we left the trail, watching us, and at one point had come close to the car. I hurriedly took her out of the car and as soon as she saw those prints, her face turned pale. She immediately realized what had happened. We were both silent, but the fear was so intense that words were unnecessary. In that moment, it became obvious that what we had experienced was something supernatural. We couldn't explain it, but we both knew that something was watching us that night on Big Frog Mountain. I swear this story is the absolute truth. What we experienced, I will never forget. It was a real sense of being in the presence of something dark, something unnatural. We both knew that this experience would stay with us forever, and I will never forget the strange mark that day left on my memory. Hidden in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, among the high, bleak mountains and endless forests, are dozens of abandoned mines. These mines once served as a source of life for many settlements in the region, producing coal and other minerals. However, not all mines had a long fate. In the 1920s, one of these mines experienced a terrible tragedy that left a deep mark on the history of these places. We are talking about a mine located near a small town that no longer exists on the map. According to local legends, the mine was known for its difficult working conditions and frequent accidents. But the worst event was a cave-in that occurred in 1924. About 40 men were working in the mine that day. Suddenly, the tunnel collapsed, and the miners were trapped under tons of rock and coal. Despite attempts by rescuers, it was not possible to pull out the living men. They all died, and the bodies were never found, as the mine was soon closed and abandoned. Since then, local residents began to tell about the strange events that took place in those places. At night, if you walk through the forest towards the mine, you could hear the sounds of footsteps, the clatter of pickaxes on stone and metal scraping, as if miners were working there again. Some old-timers claim that they were even attracted by strange lights that would suddenly appear in the dark tunnels and then disappear as quickly as they appeared. One day in 2008, a group of extreme sports enthusiasts who decided to explore an abandoned mine went to the very same forest to try to find the entrance to the old mine. They had prepared in advance. They took flashlights, maps, and cameras with them. However, not all of them realized what they were walking into. The path led them through a dense forest where the trees intertwined with each other and the air was filled with something sticky and moist. After walking for several kilometers, they finally reached the mine entrance, which was hidden behind moss-covered rocks and trees. The entrance looked like an old, dilapidated archway leading into the dark bowels of the earth. When they went down inside, they immediately felt a strange cold sensation, as if the air was saturated with something invisible and pressing. Lanterns barely lit the way, and the walls were covered with a layer of coal dust and slime. Suddenly, one of the group, Mark, who was walking first, froze in place. He heard a strange thumping sound, faint at first, but growing louder every moment. It was as if the sound was coming from a dark tunnel that started right in front of them. "It's probably an echo," one of the participants tried to justify himself, but his voice sounded anxious and nervous. However, Mark could not escape the feeling that someone was actually in the mine with them. His steps became uncertain, and after a few minutes, he stopped and looked back. A silhouette standing in the shadows caught his attention. He clearly sensed something or someone watching them closely. There were no other people visible in the darkness, but strange sounds, similar to human voices, continued to come from the depths of the tunnel. Someone was whispering softly as if calling out to them for help. When the group decided to return, they noticed that the tunnel they had just been in was suddenly not as they remembered it. It was as if it had widened, and the corner they were supposed to turn had disappeared. The cartographers who were with them tried to navigate the map, but it no longer showed any coincidence with reality. This further alarmed the group. They rushed to get out of the mine. But as they ran to the surface, they encountered an even stranger phenomenon. Unusual lights began to flicker at the edge of their vision, as if someone from the misty darkness was watching their every move. But the strangest thing happened when they decided to return to the town and tell the locals about their experience. One of the participants, James, returned home to find that his camera had new photos taken in the mine. "But They didn't just show the group members, but several other people no one could remember. About 15 years ago, my friends and I were playing some kind of game. I think it was manhunt or tag. The sun had just set over the horizon, and there were still shades of purple and gold in the sky, which gave the whole thing a strange, almost mystical feeling. It was that strange time when you could see pretty decently in the open, where nothing was blocking the sky. But as soon as you went into the forest, everything went dark and the forest became like an unknown space full of rustles and shadows. One of my friends and I climbed up a hill and ducked into the shade of the trees, hiding in some kind of hole. We lay there, poking our heads out from over the edge, and watched our friends search the area. Far below, we could see their figures flickering as they searched, their footsteps creating a sound that was very dull in the silence of the night. At some point, we realized that we could easily see them all. It was a strange feeling, as if we were on the other side in some parallel reality, and they were just ordinary people who didn't notice anything unusual. And then suddenly, out of the depths of the forest behind us, music was heard. The first second, my friend and I looked at each other, thinking it was someone we knew with some strange gadget or speaker. But no, the sound was too organic, too ancient. My buddy later described it as a marching band, but in my opinion that didn't quite fit. The music was much more primitive and complex at the same time. It was like a steady drum beat you'd hear at some Native American ceremony or celebration, and something akin to singing or chanting, as if an unknown group of people on the other side of time were singing a song long forgotten. And then I heard something else, a subtle sound like the rustling of rain in a rain stick, mixed with the footsteps of a very large group of people who were moving in our direction. And this is where the real confusion caught me. If it had only been drumming or singing, I might have found an explanation for it. Legends, tribes hidden in the forests could all explain this moment, but another instrument intervened in this music. I can't describe exactly what it was, but the sound of this instrument, it was like a bagpipe, not loud but piercing, with such a sharp, barely perceptible timbre that I could hardly believe it was real. It was like I could feel it in my chest, not just in my ears, but right in the air. That strange, low, insanely harmonious bagpipe sound grew louder and louder, and I felt goosebumps run up my spine. And then, as if in response to this experience, the music suddenly disappeared, just as suddenly as it had appeared. Silence engulfed everything again. My friend and I lay there for a few more seconds, not believing that it had all happened and not knowing how to react. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, and my breathing became too fast. My buddy jumped up from his seat and rushed to the nearest safe place, toward the yard that was still slightly visible from behind the trees, and I followed without thinking. At that moment, our friends, who had been standing in the open lot and looking in the direction where the strange sound had come from, ran silently toward the house. It was so unusual, so instinctive. When we landed, jumping down the steepest slope of the hill, 2.7 to 3 meters high, I felt something unfamiliar hovering in the air. Even the air was dense and moist, as if nature itself was tuned to some frequency we knew nothing about. We spent the rest of the night whispering about our experiences. Each of us in our own way tried to make sense of what had happened. We joked, saying that it must have been the spirit of the forest, or that the forest had simply heightened our senses. But deep down, we all felt that what we had heard was much more than imagination. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Write in the comments what story you liked the most. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.